"You've always been selfish, Harper," my sister said, loud enough for the entire patio at the Bayview Harbor Club to hear. Crystal flutes stalled midair. Forks hovered over lemon tarts. Even the band quit pretending to tune. I didn't argue. Villains who argue too soon only look guiltier. I'm Harper Calloway, 27. Coastal wildlife researcher. Salt-stiff hair, a stubborn sunburn I never learned from, and a reputation in my family for being the girl who never picks the safe option. The bride is my older sister, Lila. Perfect posture, perfect teeth, perfect resume. Her new husband is Evan Whitaker, the kind of man who says all the right things and looks better than he has any right to in a Navy tux. And yes, there's history. Not the kind that makes me proud. 3 years ago, before Lila and Evan ever met, Evan and I shared exactly one not-quite date that ended with me ghosting him. I told myself it was because he lived in Charleston and I was field-tagging turtles near Tybee Island. The truth? I didn't like the way he scanned a room as if every conversation were a camera angle and he needed the best lighting. I let that be the end of it. Until it wasn't. If my life were a tidy story, this is where I would tell you I tried to stop the wedding because I'm jealous or because I like the chaos. That would make me simpler to hate. But the real reason is messier, and a lot less cinematic. 36 hours before Lila walked down the aisle, an email landed in my inbox from a burner address with 2 lines and 15 attachments. "If you care about your sister, you'll stop the wedding before it's too late." Then the evidence. Screen recordings of late-night texts, an Uber receipt, 2 hotel folios and selfies. Evan's name was on every breadcrumb. So was a contact saved as Maddie Wineglass. Maddie is not a stranger. She's Lila's maid of honor. If you've never been the inconvenient sibling, let me explain the choreography. I could have stormed in righteous and loud. I could have whispered to Lila in a powder room and watched her shatter privately. Or I could have done what I did. Keep quiet, confirm everything, and choose a moment when silence would cost the least and honesty would be unavoidable. So I did my homework. I checked the metadata, called the hotel, compared timestamps with Lila's dress fitting, and pulled up Evan's public Venmo like a coward with a magnifying glass. Every string I tugged tightened the same knot. I still didn't tell Lila. Before you decide you hate me, understand that my family doesn't do nuance. They do optics. They do who sat where at Thanksgiving and which granddaughter sent flowers on time. If I whispered to Lila behind a closed door, she'd still marry him to keep the optics pristine, and I'd be the sister who planted doubts out of spite. So I waited. The rehearsal dinner glowed with Charleston coastal money, oyster bars, Edison bulbs, hydrangeas the size of my head. Lila floated. Evan kissed foreheads. Maddie clinked her glass and toasted old friends and new chapters, and I watched Evan's eyes flick toward her for half a second too long. Later, when the patio emptied and the band packed their instruments, I cornered Maddie by the service hallway, the air cooler and less perfumed back there. She didn't scare easily. She's the kind of woman who wears red lipstick to Pilates and answers questions with a smile that asks 3 back. "Bold of you," she said before I opened my mouth. "Even for you, Harper." "Which part is bold?" I asked. "Sleeping with your best friend's fiancé or labeling him with wine emojis?" She didn't flinch. "You think you know what's happening because you saw some screenshots." "I saw enough." "Then be brave," she said. "Tell Lila." That should have been my line. I didn't like that it sounded better in her voice. She breezed past me smelling like peonies and clean ambition, and for a second I wondered if the email had come from her. A dare wrapped in a confession. The morning of the wedding, storms threatened offshore and then changed their minds. The sky over the harbor was bright and viciously blue. I curled Lila's hair in a bridal suite that smelled like hairspray and nerves, fastening the same pearl comb our grandmother wore. She looked at me in the mirror with those soft eyes that made people hand her things without being asked. "Promise me," she said, "if you ever know something I should know, you'll tell me." I thought about the files in my phone. I thought about Mom humming as she steamed the veil, about Dad in a navy suit pretending not to cry, about Evan practicing vows written in neat block letters as if neatness were character. "I promise," I said. It wasn't a lie. I just hadn't chosen the moment yet. By sunset, the patio belonged to Lila. Candles in hurricane glasses flickered against the first breeze. The harbor threw back the light like a mirror. Guests drifted to the railing with wine and opinions. When it was my turn for a toast, I didn't reach for my champagne flute. I reached for the truth. "Lila," I began, I've never been good at pretty speeches. You know, I always say the ugly thing no one wants to hear. A ripple moved through the crowd, a collective tightening. Lila's smile didn't move, but the muscles in her jaw did. Then maybe don't, Mom said pleasantly from a table near the dais, the kind of pleasant that hides 1,000 orders. I met Evan's eyes. He didn't blink. He was so sure of the story everyone would prefer. I need to speak to the two of you. Privately, I said. People hate the word privately during a party. It's a grenade with the pin halfway out. Lila nodded once, clipped and gracious in a way I envied, and we slipped through the French doors into a side room with a view of the marsh and a bowl of floating gardenias you could smell from the hallway. I set my phone on the table between us. Before I show you this, I said, I want you to know 2 things. First, I didn't come here to hurt you. Second, if I stay quiet, I'll be helping him hurt you worse. Harper, Lila whispered, what did you do? Not anything, I said. Not yet. I tapped play. The first screen record played soundlessly. Evan's name, Maddie's wine glass emoji, a string of messages that no one could mistake for innocent. The timestamp lined up with Lila's fitting. The hotel folio scrolled. The Uber receipt chimed. Evan's face didn't crumble, it calcified. Lila's breath hitched once. Then she did what she always does. Absorbed the blow without letting the dress wrinkle. You're mistaken, Evan said calmly, the way executives apologize without admitting anything. This is taken out of context. Of what? I asked. A joint bachelorette party? He turned to Lila, not me. You know how your sister is. She thrives on drama. It would be easier for you if I were the villain. I could feel the room nudging her toward the oldest story we have, golden daughter, chaotic sister. Lila's eyes moved from the phone to Evan to me. Why now? She asked me quietly. Why here? Because if I told you earlier you'd have smiled through it. Because Maddie told me to be brave and I hated that she did. Because I promised you this morning. I didn't say any of that. I said the ugliest simple version. Because I love you. And I think you're about to marry a man who loves options. Outside, someone laughed too loudly, the sound carrying over the water. Inside, my sister's life rearranged itself 1 millimeter at a time. Delete it, Evan said, his voice lower now. You're not going to ruin this. I slid the phone back into my dress pocket. I didn't make the evidence, I said. I just refused to look away. He took 1 step toward me. Not threatening. Practiced. The kind of step men take when they expect the room to make space. Lila reached for his sleeve and missed. Harper, she said, in a tone I'd only ever heard when hurricanes were coming and she needed the car keys. Who sent you those files? I don't know, I said. Yet. And then my phone buzzed again in my pocket, a single new message from the same burner address. You're not telling her the most important part. Should I? The room felt too small for the 3 of us. Evan's jaw flexed like he was biting back a string of words he'd regret. Lila stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her as if someone had just taken a formal portrait. I pulled my phone from my pocket without taking my eyes off them. The new message was just 1 line, no attachments this time. She deserves to know about the fund. No punctuation at the end. Just that word, fund. Lila's eyes flicked to the screen in my hand. What is it? I didn't answer right away. I knew better than to hand over half a puzzle without context. Instead, I scrolled up, confirming it was the same burner account. Same blank profile icon. Same nothing in the sender field but an address ending in a string of random numbers. Evan shifted his weight. Harper, if this is some game. I laughed once, a sharp sound I didn't plan. Game? Evan, if I were playing games, you wouldn't even see the board. Harper, Lila said, her voice firm now. What's the fund? I met her eyes. I was hoping you could tell me. That got me the first crack in her composure. A blink too slow. Before she could answer, the French doors opened just enough for Maddie to slip inside, bouquet still in her hand like she'd been caught mid-toast. They're asking for the bride and groom, she said, scanning our faces. What's going on in here? The way she looked at Evan wasn't casual. It was a check-in. I could see it in the microsecond between glances, her reading his expression before deciding how to react. Lila caught it too. I watched her shoulders tense, watched the tilt of her chin sharpen. Maddie, Lila said slowly, Harper just showed me some messages. Maddie's smile didn't falter, but her grip on the bouquet tightened. And I cut in, we were about to discuss what this mystery sender means by the fund. Maddie's gaze flicked to me quick as a match strike. I wouldn't know anything about that. Evan exhaled through his nose, like a man realizing the tide isn't in his favor. This is ridiculous. Lila, you can't let her ruin today over some anonymous. Stop, Lila said. The word landed like a gavel. It was quiet enough now that I could hear the muffled strains of the band outside, tuning for the next set. My phone buzzed again. Same sender. This time there was an attachment. I opened it. A PDF of what looked like a bank statement. Top of the page. Whitaker Family Trust, Event Contingency Fund. The numbers on it weren't small. And 2 withdrawals were highlighted in yellow, both matching the dates from Evan and Maddie's hotel stays. I turned the screen toward Lila. I think the honeymoon was already paid for, I said, just, not by you. Her hand went to her mouth. Evan reached for the phone, but I stepped back. This is a setup, he snapped. Anyone could fake that. True, I said. But I'm starting to think the sender isn't just anyone. For a beat no one moved. Then Lila straightened, smoothing the fabric of her dress as if she'd decided something. Harper, she said, stay here. Both of you, she shot a glance at Evan and Maddie, outside. Now. They hesitated. Lila didn't repeat herself. He didn't need to. When the door closed behind them, she turned back to me. I need you to find out who's sending these. Why? I asked. If you believe what's in them, you already have enough to end this. Her expression shifted. Less hurt now, more calculation. Because if I end this, I want to know exactly who I'm taking down when I do. And just like that, my sister, the golden one, stepped off her pedestal and onto my side of the line. I stayed in that side room while the reception outside carried on like nothing had happened. Lila had gone out there with the kind of calm only she could fake, smiling for photos, nodding through small talk, and letting no one suspect that her marriage might already be a ghost in the making. Meanwhile, I sat at the little table by the window, the bank statement still glowing on my phone, and tried to figure out where to start. Whoever was sending these messages wasn't sloppy. The burner email had no trail, the attachments were scrubbed of metadata, and the timing of each drop was surgical. I thought about Maddie, perfect hair, perfect posture, eyes that always seemed to land where the most attention was. If this was her idea of a confession, why hide behind anonymity? She could have told Lila herself. That's the kind of drama Maddie usually liked to wear like perfume. No, this was someone else. Someone with access to Evan's accounts and the nerve to feed the truth in doses. I opened a new browser tab and started poking around. Public records, corporate filings, wedding registries, anything with the Whitaker name on it. It didn't take long to find that the Whitaker Family Trust wasn't just a savings account. It was a fund controlled by Evan's father and used for personal contingencies, which seemed to be a polite way of saying covering up expensive mistakes. A chair scraped outside the door. My heart jumped. Then Maddie's voice, low and sharp. She wasn't talking to me, she was on the phone. No, she's not buying it, Maddie hissed. Yes, I'm trying. But Lila's not as blind as you think. Pause. Then, if this blows up, it's not on me. You're the one who, she cut herself off, footsteps moving away before I could catch the rest. I stood, cracked the door just enough to see her back disappearing down the hall toward the catering area. My instinct was to follow, but the phone in my hand buzzed again. Another message from the burner. Check under the name Baxter Whitaker. Same fund. I typed the name into the registry database and there it was. Another withdrawal, not highlighted this time, but dated just 2 days before the wedding. The payee? A jewelry store in downtown Charleston. The kind that doesn't list prices online. My stomach turned. I didn't know if the gift was for Lila, Maddie, or someone else entirely, but I knew one thing. The sender was pulling me deeper into a story that had more branches than I'd thought. The door opened behind me. Making friends. Evan stepped in, shutting it with deliberate quiet. His smile was thin and wrong. You've always been good at sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I slid my phone into my pocket. And you've always been good at pretending you're the smartest man in the room. He took a step closer and for the first time all night I saw something new in his eyes. Panic buried under the arrogance. You have no idea what you're getting into, Harper, he said. Maybe not, I told him. But I know exactly what you're trying to hide. And for a split second the mask cracked. Evan's gaze flicked toward the French doors, as if calculating how quickly he could walk back into the reception and paste on his polished smile. I didn't move and I didn't give him room to pass. "What's Baxter Whitaker buying jewelry for 2 days before your wedding?" I asked. The name hit him like a misstep on black ice. Small, almost invisible, but enough to throw him off balance. "That's none of your business," he said too quickly. "See, that's where you're wrong," I replied. "It became my business the second my sister's name went on a marriage license next to yours." His eyes narrowed. "Where did you hear that name?" I smiled, but not kindly. "Wouldn't you love to know?" For a moment he just stood there, breathing slowly, jaw tight. Then he leaned closer, dropping his voice. "You think you're protecting her, Harper? You're not. You're putting her in the crosshairs." It wasn't a threat, not exactly. But it was close enough to set my pulse racing. "You have 3 options right now," I said evenly. "You can tell me who Maddie is to you, you can tell me what Baxter's really paying for, or you can wait until the person who's feeding me all this decides to tell Lila themselves. My guess? They won't be as gentle." He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, that perfect tousle move that probably worked on everyone but me. "You always were dramatic," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. When he finally left, I locked the door behind him. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, because the more I saw him flinch, the more I knew the anonymous sender was real and close and just as invested in bringing him down as I was. I sat back down and pulled out my phone again. No new messages. The last line on the bank statement burned in my mind. Baxter Whitaker, Whitaker Family Trust, discretionary purchase. I decided to test the waters. I sent a reply to the burner email. "I'm in. But I want to know who you are." The response came less than a minute later. "Meet me before the night's over. Dock behind the club. Come alone." It was a cliché, sure. But clichés exist because they work. I stayed in that room for another 15 minutes, pretending to scroll through photos in case anyone walked in, then slipped out the side door. The reception was still in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, the band sliding into an upbeat cover to get people dancing. Lila was nowhere in sight. Neither was Evan. Maddie was at the far end of the patio, deep in conversation with one of the groomsmen, her hand resting on his arm like she'd known him forever. The air outside the reception lights was cooler, the briny smell of the marsh cutting through the perfume and champagne. I followed the gravel path down to the wooden dock. The pilings creaked under my steps. Someone was already there, leaning against the railing. A man in his early 40s, tall, in a gray suit that looked a little too heavy for the Charleston humidity. He turned when he heard me and I knew immediately, this was not some stranger who stumbled onto the wrong party. "You're Harper," he said like it was a statement he'd been holding onto for years. "And you're?" I prompted. "Baxter Whitaker." The name landed harder than I expected, even though I'd been chasing it all night. "I'm Evan's older brother," he said. "And if you're smart, you'll help me make sure he doesn't get away with this wedding." Baxter's voice had the low, deliberate cadence of someone used to being listened to. His eyes, sharp, pale gray, never left mine, as if he was cataloging my reactions as much as he was speaking. "You're the one sending the emails," I said. He gave a half smile. "You're quick." Evan always underestimated that in people. The dock shifted under us as a small boat passed in the channel, its wake slapping against the pilings. Somewhere back near the reception, music thumped faintly, too far to make out the song, close enough to remind me that Lila was up there, still in the dress, still smiling for people who thought she'd just secured her happy ending. "Why me?" I asked. "Why not go to her directly?" "Because Lila doesn't know me," Baxter said. "And when the truth comes from a stranger, people have a way of choosing not to believe it, especially when it's about someone they love. But you've already planted the first seed." I didn't like the way he said planted, like this was all part of a garden he'd been tending for months. "What's the fund for?" I asked. He leaned on the railing, looking out toward the water. "Originally, discretion. My father set it up to clean up Evan's messes before they became front-page news. The kind of things money can fix: credit card debts, bad investments, a few personal indiscretions. And now it's bled into paying off the right people to stay quiet. Maddie's hotel stays? The jewelry? That's him keeping his latest secret on a leash." I didn't ask what the secret was. The look on Baxter's face told me I wasn't ready for the details. Not yet. So what's your angle? I said. Big brother finally grows a conscience? He turned to me fully. My angle is that Evan's about to inherit control of the family trust when he gets married. Once that happens, not even I can stop him from using it however he wants. And believe me, he will burn through it in ways that will hurt more people than you can imagine, including your sister. The air between us felt heavier now, thick with the smell of salt and rotting seagrass. What do you need from me? I asked. Proof, he said simply. You're already closer to him than I can get right now. He'll slip around you if he thinks you're still deciding whether to play nice. When he does, you'll see things, hear things that I can't. I need you to get them. And then I'll make sure the right people see it. Board members, attorneys, journalists if it comes to that. Evan walks away with nothing. Your sister walks away clean. It all sounded too rehearsed. Too easy. And if I decide not to help you? I asked. Baxter smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. Then I hope you have a very good speech ready for the day Lila finds out you had a chance to stop this and didn't. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind us. I turned, half expecting Maddie or Evan, but it was Lila. Still in the dress, hair slightly looser now, the expression on her face unreadable. Harper, she said, we need to talk. Alone. Baxter stepped back, hands raised like he was already fading into the shadows. I'll be in touch, he murmured. And then it was just me and my sister under the string lights, the dock swaying slightly as she took a deep breath. Tell me everything, she said. We stood there on the dock, the faint hum of the reception drifting toward us like it belonged to a different world. Lila's dress caught the glow of the string lights. The hem darkened where the sea breeze had blown mist onto it. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She looked surgical, like she'd decided this was going to be an operation, not a scene. I saw him talking to Maddie, she said quietly. His hand was on her back. It wasn't just a friendly gesture. So, Harper, start from the beginning. I told her about the first email, the screenshots, the Uber receipts, the hotel folios. I told her about the second message, the bank statement, the jewelry purchase. And I told her about Baxter, though I left out the part where he'd asked me to work with him. I didn't trust her to hear that without deciding I'd been in on his game from the start. When I finished, she stood still for a long moment, the only movement the pearls at her ears swinging gently with the wind. Baxter, she repeated finally. I met him once. At a dinner when Evan and I got engaged. He barely said 2 words to me. Maybe he was playing the long game, I said. Her gaze sharpened. Or maybe he just doesn't like me. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure which was worse, Baxter using me as a pawn, or Lila thinking she'd been a target for reasons beyond Evan's infidelity. I want to see the messages, she said. I handed her my phone, letting her scroll. Her fingers moved fast, eyes scanning each line with the precision of someone cataloging evidence. These are damning, she admitted. But they're not complete. If Baxter's feeding you this, he has more. And if he has more, I need to know why he's not giving it to me directly. I asked him that, I said. He said you wouldn't believe a stranger. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. He's not wrong. But here's the thing, Harper. You're not exactly a neutral party here either. People have always believed the worst about you because you don't try to be palatable. I'm aware, I said. She handed my phone back. I'm not ending this tonight. That was not what I expected. Lila, I'm not walking back into that reception alone. If this marriage ends, it's going to end in a way that takes him down with it. Quietly, permanently, and without him spinning a version that makes me look like the fool. The chill in her voice made the hair rise on my arms. So what's the plan? I asked. You'll keep talking to Baxter, she said. But you won't commit to anything until we know what he really wants. Meanwhile, I'll keep Evan thinking I believe him. And Maddie. Her jaw tightened. Maddie will think I don't suspect her at all. Which will make it much easier to catch her when she slips. The tide sloshed against the pilings, and for a moment we just stood there, the air between us taut with unspoken things. I don't hate you for this, she said suddenly. That's a low bar, I replied. Her lips curved just slightly. Don't make me regret saying it. She turned back toward the club, her train whispering over the wood planks. I followed a few steps behind, and as we approached the patio, I could see Evan at the far end watching us. His expression was unreadable, but his posture was tense, like he knew the current was shifting and he couldn't see which way. Inside, the music swelled again. Lila stepped into the light, slipped her hand through Evan's arm and smiled for the guests. And I thought, God help him if he thinks that smile means safety. The reception had shifted into that late evening rhythm where champagne flows faster than the conversation. Guests laughed too loudly at half-told stories, kids darted between tables in rumpled dress clothes, and the band played something warm and slow enough to make couples sway. From my place near the bar, I watched Lila work the room. Every smile, every nod was perfectly measured, as if she'd spent years in political campaigns instead of architectural firms. Evan stayed close, his hand light on her back, his mouth bending into a performance grin that didn't touch his eyes. Maddie orbited them like a moon, never more than 3 feet away, refilling glasses and intercepting any moment that looked private. I just started wondering how long I could fade into the wallpaper before someone noticed when a waiter brushed past, slipping a folded cocktail napkin onto the bar beside me. On the outside in neat block letters, "Check your phone." I scanned the room, but no one was looking my way. When I pulled out my phone, the burner address had struck again. "She's wearing it tonight." It took me a beat. Then I knew exactly who she was. I angled myself toward Maddie. She was laughing at something one of the groomsmen said, her hand resting on her hip. And there was a bracelet. Delicate gold studded with tiny emeralds. The same bracelet from the jewelry store's website I'd looked up earlier. The one purchased with a withdrawal from the Whitaker Family Trust 2 days ago. I didn't have time to react before the bandleader tapped the mic, announcing Evan's toast. He stepped up to the small platform, glass in hand, every inch the charming groom. "I just want to thank all of you for being here," he began, voice smooth as if he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "And especially to my beautiful wife who—" He looked at Lila, and for a split second, something in her expression made him falter. It was small, barely a hitch, but I saw it. "Who makes me believe in second chances," he finished. The crowd clinked glasses. Maddie beamed at them both, her bracelet catching the light like it was in on the joke. When Evan stepped down, weaving through well-wishers, I caught Lila's eye across the room. I didn't have to mouth anything, she'd already clocked the bracelet. Her gaze followed Maddie's every move, calculating. A few minutes later, Lila was at my side, her champagne untouched. "That's the one?" she asked under her breath. "That's the one." Her lips barely moved. "Good. Now we know what to take from her when the time comes." The way she said it sent a shiver through me, not because it was cold but because it was precise. And for the first time that night I realized my sister wasn't just reacting anymore. She was hunting. The rest of the evening blurred into a series of polite performances. Lila stayed anchored to Evan's side, playing the role of the radiant newlywed so convincingly that even I started to forget the storm gathering under her composure. Maddie, oblivious, or maybe confident she was untouchable, floated from group to group, flashing that emerald bracelet like it was a crown jewel. I waited until Maddie stepped out onto the terrace alone, phone in hand, her posture shifting into that semi-private stance people take when they expect gossip. I followed a few seconds later, pretending to be checking messages. "Big night," I said casually. She glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. "You following me now?" "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I just wanted to see that bracelet up close." Her smile was pure theater. "You have good taste." "I do," I said, "and I also have a copy of the bank statement that paid for it." The smile faltered just enough to register. "You're bluffing." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the laughter from inside wouldn't drown me out. "You think so? Funny thing is, I don't even have to bluff. The account, the date, the store, it's all right there. Along with the hotel bills. Both of them." Maddie's eyes narrowed, scanning my face for cracks. "What do you want?" "That's the wrong question," I said. "The right question is, what do you want Evan to think I want?" She tilted her head. "Why would I care what he thinks? Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be wearing his gift in front of 100 people who believe you're just the loyal maid of honor." For a moment I thought she'd snap back. Instead she smoothed her hair and smiled again, slower this time. "Careful, Harper. You might find out I'm a better liar than you are a truth-teller." She walked back inside, leaving the faint scent of her perfume and a trail of questions I couldn't shake. When I returned to the main room, Lila was waiting near the far wall, her back to the crowd. "Did she bite?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But she knows I'm watching her." "Good," Lila replied. "Because tomorrow we make her show her hand." I frowned. "Tomorrow?" She glanced past me toward Evan and Maddie, who were now deep in conversation by the dessert table. I told Evan we'd host a small brunch at the house. Just close friends and family. "And Maddie," I guessed. "And Maddie," she confirmed. "If Baxter's right, whatever they're hiding will be harder to contain in daylight. Especially if we give them room to think they're safe." It was bold. Risky. Exactly the kind of play I'd expect from myself, not from her. And yet, watching the precision in her eyes, I had the uneasy feeling that Lila had been waiting her whole life for a game like this. By the time I pulled up to Lila and Evan's place the next morning, the August heat was already settling over Charleston like a heavy quilt. The house, white-clapboard, dark shutters, a wide porch, looked like something out of a wedding magazine, which only made the tension I carried feel sharper. Lila greeted me at the door, flawless in a soft blue sundress. No trace of the previous night's revelations lingered on her face. "You're early," she said, but she sounded pleased. "I wanted to see the battlefield before the fight," I replied. The dining room table was set for 10. Fresh flowers, polished silver, a pitcher of mimosas catching the morning light. If you didn't know better, you'd think this was just a genteel southern brunch. Within 20 minutes, the guests began to arrive. Evan's college friends, a couple of Lila's co-workers, and right on cue, Maddie. She breezed in wearing white linen and that bracelet. Baxter arrived last, his gray suit replaced by a crisp short-sleeve shirt, still looking slightly out of place in the genteel chaos. He caught my eye from across the room and gave the smallest nod, just enough to tell me he was here for more than the eggs and fruit salad. The first half hour was polite chatter. The clink of cutlery, compliments on the decor, Lila laughing at the right moments. Then as plates cleared, she rose from her seat. "I have a little something for my maid of honor," she said, moving toward Maddie with a small velvet box in hand. "Just a token of thanks for all you've done." The room hummed with curiosity. Maddie accepted the box, her expression perfectly controlled, and opened it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet, beautiful but clearly a step down from the emerald one she wore. "It's lovely," Maddie said, slipping it on her other wrist. Lila tilted her head. "It pairs nicely with the one you got 2 days before the wedding. The one from Bellingham and Company jewelry store. Right, Evan?" The air shifted. Evan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Maddie's eyes flicked to him, then back to Lila. "I'm not sure what you mean," Maddie said, her voice light but too quick. "That's odd," Lila replied, "because the receipt I've seen says otherwise. It even lists the payment source, the Whitaker Family Trust." A murmur rippled around the table. Evan set his fork down slowly. "Lila, let's not do this here." "No," she said, her tone sharper now. "Let's do exactly this here." Baxter leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold with something close to satisfaction. I could feel it. The moment was tilting, the truth ready to tumble out. Maddie's fingers tightened around her napkin. Evan's jaw worked like he was chewing rocks. And just when I thought one of them would crack, Maddie smiled. "You should tell her, Evan," she said sweetly. "Or should I?" The silence after Maddie's words was so sharp it felt like the air in the dining room had thinned. Forks rested in midair. Somewhere outside, a cicada buzzed, oblivious to the implosion about to happen inside. Evan didn't look at Maddie. He didn't look at Lila. He looked at me. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" His voice was low, brittle. "To blow everything up." "Don't give me that much credit," I said. "You're doing fine on your own." Lila's hand rested lightly on the back of a chair, her nails barely tapping the wood. "Tell me," she said, steady and flat. Evan pushed his chair back, the scrape against the hardwood louder than his sigh. "Fine. Maddie and I." "Spare the euphemisms," Lila cut in. He glanced at Baxter, who hadn't moved except to take a slow sip of his mimosa, like this was all a long-anticipated matinee. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," Evan said finally. "The bracelet, the hotel, it was about keeping her quiet." Maddie laughed once, short, sharp, bitter. "Quiet about what, Evan? That you've been siphoning money out of the trust for months? That the contingency fund is basically your personal slush pile?" Or maybe you mean quiet about the fact that your little inheritance hinges on staying married for 1 year without scandal. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the word scandal hanging in the air like smoke. That's why you married me, Lila said, her voice low but cutting. Not because you loved me. Because I looked like the kind of woman who wouldn't cause trouble. Evan didn't deny it. And that silence said more than any excuse could. Baxter leaned forward, finally breaking his spectator's stance. Looks like trouble found you anyway, little brother. Evan's jaw tightened. And you'd know all about that, wouldn't you? Difference is, Baxter said, I don't get caught. For a moment, it felt like the two of them might tear each other apart right there at the table. But Lila's voice cut through the tension, crisp and clear. Everyone out. The guests hesitated, caught between shock and curiosity. Now, she said, and the steel in her tone left no room for hesitation. Chairs scraped, murmurs filled the hallway, and within a minute the only ones left were Lila, Evan, Maddie, Baxter, and me. Lila stepped around the table until she was standing directly across from Evan. You have until tonight to get out of my house, she said. And if you so much as think about touching the trust again, I'll make sure every board member knows exactly how you've been using it. Evan's mouth opened, but Maddie beat him to it. You think that's going to stop him? She said. You don't know him like I do. He'll just find another angle. Maybe, Lila replied. But not with my name attached to it. Baxter stood, straightening his sleeves. I'll make sure of that. Evan's eyes darted between the two of them, and for the first time since I'd met him I saw it. The realization that the game he'd been playing wasn't one he could win. Lila turned to me. Harper, would you mind showing our guests out? It wasn't a request. Maddie brushed past me without a word, but as she reached the door she murmured just loud enough for me to hear. Careful. You're on her side now. That doesn't always end well. When the door closed behind them, the quiet in the house felt heavy. Lila sank into a chair, her shoulders finally dropping. It's not over, she said. Not yet. And somehow I knew she wasn't talking about Evan at all. By late afternoon the house smelled like citrus cleaner and stale champagne. The brunch table was stripped bare, chairs pushed back like soldiers after retreat. Lila moved through the dining room with a trash bag in one hand, methodically tossing wilted flowers and abandoned coffee cups. You should rest, I told her. I will, she said, when I know exactly how deep this goes. Baxter had stayed behind after Evan and Maddie left, claiming he wanted to help with the fallout. Really, he'd been parked in a corner chair for the past hour, tapping at his phone with the faint smirk of someone orchestrating something 2 steps ahead of everyone else. You have what you need now, I said to him. Why are you still here? Because my brother is cornered, Baxter replied, not looking up. And cornered men make desperate moves. If he's as predictable as I think, he'll try to salvage the trust by discrediting the person who exposed him. That's you, by the way. Lila dropped the trash bag beside the table. If he tries, he'll regret it. Baxter finally looked at her. I don't doubt that. But you'll want more than threats, you'll want receipts. Which means you need to decide whether you're willing to get your hands dirty. I already have, Lila said, voice even. I watched them, the shift in their dynamic making my skin itch. Baxter wasn't just an ally, he was testing her. And she was passing. The front door creaked open without warning. I tensed, but it was just Evan. No smile, no attempt at charm, just standing in the doorway in a fresh shirt like he'd come straight from somewhere important. We need to talk, he said to Lila. You've got 30 seconds, she replied. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. You think you've boxed me in? You haven't. If you take this public, I'll make sure Maddie tells every reporter in the state about your little side arrangement with Baxter. Lila didn't blink. What arrangement? The one where he gets you to keep quiet in exchange for getting control of the trust himself, Evan said, watching her reaction like a gambler watching dice roll. Baxter laughed under his breath. Desperate move number 1, he murmured. I don't care what you tell people, Lila said. But you might care about what happens when I forward the board those bank statements. And the video from this morning. Evan froze. What video? I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The one I recorded during brunch. It's amazing what you can capture on a device everyone assumes you're just texting on. His eyes narrowed. You'd really ruin me. No, Lila said. You did that yourself. He looked between us. Me, Lila, Baxter. and for the first time I thought he might actually apologize. But then the mask slid back into place. "This isn't over," he said, turning for the door. As it closed behind him, Baxter glanced at Lila. "Desperate move number 2 will come fast. Be ready." She didn't answer. But I could see it in her eyes, she was already planning the checkmate. Evan's "this isn't over" was less a warning and more a confession. By the next morning, it was clear he hadn't gone quietly. I woke to 3 missed calls from an unfamiliar Charleston number and a single text from Lila. "He's making his move. Come over." When I arrived, Baxter's SUV was in the driveway. Inside, the living room looked like a war room. Laptops open, papers spread across the coffee table, Lila perched on the arm of the sofa with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "He went to the board," she said without looking up. "And?" I asked. Baxter leaned back in his chair, looking far too relaxed. "And he told them he gestured at me, fabricated the bank statements, hacked his accounts, and manipulated Lila to stage a public scene so she could file for divorce with leverage." "Creative," I said. "Also completely insane." "Insane doesn't matter if it muddies the water," Lila replied. "Some of them will hesitate to act if they think it's all just sibling drama and bitter in-laws." "So what's the counter?" I asked. She finally looked up at me and there was steel in her eyes. "We give them something they can't ignore." Baxter slid a flash drive across the table toward me. "This is from a security consultant I trust. It's the full transaction history for the Whitaker family trust over the last 18 months. Including the offshore transfers Evan made to accounts under Maddie's name." I picked it up carefully as if it might burn me. "Where did you?" "Don't ask," Baxter said. "Just know it's clean enough to hold up in front of the board, the press, and a court if it comes to that." Lila stood, smoothing the hem of her blazer. She'd changed into one while I was driving over, the soft blue sundress gone. "We're meeting the board in an hour." "Harper, you're coming." "Why me?" "Because you've been his target from the start," she said. "It'll mean more coming from you." The Whitaker boardroom was every cliché of old money influence. Mahogany table, oil paintings of unsmiling ancestors, and a view of the harbor worth more than most houses. 12 members sat around it, all with expressions that said they'd rather be anywhere else. Evan was already there, looking crisp and confident in a charcoal suit, Maddie beside him in muted beige like a shadow. He started in immediately, spinning his version. Vindictive sister, manufactured evidence, jealous of his marriage. I could see a few heads nodding, not out of belief but out of a desire for the simplest resolution. And then Lila motioned to me. I stepped forward, plugged Baxter's flash drive into the laptop at the end of the table, and brought up the transaction history. One by one I pointed out the withdrawals, the matching receipts, the dates lining up with Maddie's travel. The room shifted. The nods stopped. Finally I clicked to the last slide. A still from hotel security footage of Evan and Maddie checking in together, time-stamped 3 days before the wedding, her bracelet flashing in the light. "You can choose to ignore this," I said, my voice steady, "but it will be harder to ignore when it's on the front page of the Post and Courier tomorrow morning." Silence stretched. Then the chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Whitaker, until further notice, your access to the trust is suspended. We will appoint an interim administrator." Evan's face went slack, the first real crack in his armor I'd seen. Maddie's hand slid off his arm. Lila stood, gathering her folder. "Meeting adjourned," she said, and without waiting for acknowledgement she walked out. Baxter followed, looking like a man who'd just watched a perfect hand play out. I stayed a moment longer, meeting Evan's eyes. "You were right," I told him quietly. "It's not over. But you're out of moves." When I stepped into the hallway, the harbor wind rushed in through the open doors, and for the first time in days I felt like I could breathe. The elevator doors closed behind us, sealing off the boardroom tension. Lila didn't speak until we reached the street, her heels clicking in sharp rhythm against the marble floor. "That's it," she said, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for days. "He's done." Baxter smiled faintly. "Not quite. He still has Maddie. She's the kind who doesn't walk away without taking something with her." As if on cue my phone buzzed. "Unknown number. If you think you've won. Check your email." I opened my inbox and saw it. An email from Maddie with no subject line. Inside was a single attachment. A photo of Lila and Baxter on the dock last night, heads bent close in conversation. The angle was perfect for gossip columns, ambiguous enough to stir rumors, clear enough to plant doubt. I showed it to Lila. She barely glanced at it. "Let her send it," she said. "If Evan wants to argue that his wife was conspiring against him with his brother, that only reinforces everything we showed the board. And if people want to think there's more between me and Baxter," she shrugged, "let them. They'll get bored." Baxter smirked. "For the record, I'm flattered." It was almost too anticlimactic until Lila added, "But Maddie doesn't get to walk away untouched. Harper, you still have that jewelry receipt." An hour later we were in the back office of Bellingham and Company with the store manager, a man whose politeness barely concealed his discomfort at being dragged into a family implosion. Lila slid the receipt across the desk. "This was purchased with funds taken without authorization from the Whitaker Family Trust," she said. "I believe that qualifies as fraud. I'd like to return the item and have the funds credited back to the account." The manager hesitated. "We'd need the bracelet itself." Lila smiled. "You'll have it by the end of the day." That evening Maddie's social media lit up with a post of her new chapter, in another city, minus the bracelet. She'd left Charleston with a single suitcase and, according to Baxter, with a non-disclosure agreement she hadn't planned on signing. As for Evan, the trust's interim administrator froze his personal accounts pending a full audit. By nightfall he was calling Lila, not to apologize but to beg for a private settlement. She didn't answer. "This is the part," Baxter said over a late dinner that night, "where he realizes the only card left in his hand is self-pity." "And you?" I asked him. "What do you get now that he's out?" He lifted his glass, the faintest glint in his eye. "Exactly what I came for." I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be reassuring. 6 months later, Charleston's social pages were still buzzing with whispers about the Whitaker scandal, but for Lila, the noise had faded into something distant, like the hum of cicadas in another season. She'd sold the house she'd shared with Evan, moved into a renovated loft near the waterfront, and taken on a string of high-profile projects at her firm. The divorce had been final for 2 months. No alimony. No settlements. No public statements. Baxter had stepped in as interim administrator of the Whitaker Family Trust. Temporarily, he claimed. Whether Lila believed him was unclear, but their occasional lunches suggested some form of truce. As for Evan, the last I heard he was living in a rental outside Savannah, driving a car that wasn't leased for the first time in his adult life. The audit had uncovered enough personal expenses to bar him from ever managing family funds again. Maddie's name came up once in connection with a boutique PR firm in Atlanta, but she stayed quiet, either because of the NDA or because she'd finally learned when silence was worth more than attention. Me. I was back in the field, tracking sea turtle migrations and enjoying the clean simplicity of work that didn't require playing chess with people's egos. Lila called sometimes, usually with no agenda, just to tell me about a client win or a new coffee place she liked. One afternoon she stopped by my place unannounced, dropping off a small box wrapped in navy ribbon. Inside was a compass, old brass, its face slightly scratched. "Thought you might like something to point you in the right direction," she said. I turned it in my hand, the needle swinging north. "And where's that for me?" He smiled, small knowing. "Wherever you decide it is. Just don't wait for the perfect moment to change course. Sometimes you have to make it yourself." I watched her walk back to her car, sunlight catching on the edge of her hair. The compass sat warm in my palm, and for the first time since the wedding I realized something. In trying to protect her, I'd given her the chance to protect herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real win.